What's up, guys? What of course you're going to be seeing today is a breakdown and review of the exotic scout rifle in Destiny called Tlaloc. It's a Warlock exclusive weapon that can only be acquired by leveling up to rank 3 with the gunsmith. The weapon is extremely unique in how it impacts the weapon and your playstyle as a result with one key perk, and I'll address this shortly. First off, statistically the fire rate's 37%, it has an impact rating of 48%, a range of 59, a stability rating of 40, a reload percentage of 52, and a magazine size of 20. It has an aim assist rating of 55, so it's middle of the pack, and an equip speed of about 45, which is a bit below the pack. If this actual base damage statistics sound familiar, it's because it's that same middle of the pack versus fire rate damage type archetype as year 1 favorite Vision of Confluence. Before getting to the perks, Tlaloc doesn't really have any stats that stand out good or bad, so there isn't really a glaring weakness in any stat, nor is there one that really takes, you're like, whoa, when you look at that stat. So being able to be a sort of jack-of-all-trades weapon is quite possibly its greatest strength. Every stat minus stability, which is a little bit on the low side but still quite manageable, aren't bad at all. But the perks, more so for this weapon than any other weapon in the game, really make it stand out. I'll get to that in a second. In terms of PvP damage output, it hits for 40 on body shots and 60 on headshots. With regard to the skill tree, all Tlalocs are the same because they're exotics. They all deal kinetic damage. You have an always active perk called the Grenadier, which allows for kills with this weapon to reduce the cooldown on your grenade, and that comes in amazing handy, more so than you'd think. You have 3 options in terms of sights, or ballistics. Smooth ballistics, which gives a boost to range, but also increases recoil. Accurized ballistics, which increases range and impact, but also recoil. And lastly, soft ballistics, which decreases recoil, but also applies a penalty to impact. My choice is soft ballistics because of the predictability it offers in recoil control, and everything else, once you learn to control the recoil, can be countered in terms of your skill and playstyle. When breaking down the skill tree further, the first perk is called Eye of the Storm, which has the weapon become more accurate as the player's health gets lower. This can be especially useful in those very close, even firefights in PvP, or even when you feel like you're being mobbed in PvE encounters and you need just a little bit of extra firepower and stability. And it still works if you switch weapons. So if you're getting mobbed and you switch to a machine gun, you're still going to have this perk active. The next 3 perks which you'll have a choice over are Hand Loaded, which increases the weapon's effective range, Armor Piercing Rounds, which over-penetrate targets, but isn't reliable for piercing walls or buildings, so it's kind of a letdown there, and Injection Mold, which increases stability and offers faster weapon handling at the expense of some reduced range. Now, 2 of those are viable, and extended range that Hand Loaded offers, considering that recoil management isn't very difficult with this weapon, is always a plus, but Injection Mold also works if you want every bit of that last bit of stability. Yeah, that choice is yours. The last perk makes this weapon, and it's called Overflow. I even have its own section made for this because it's so unique. When your super is charged, the weapon has better handling, a faster fire rate, and increased stability, and you still deal 40 to 6 that 40 body shot, 60 headshot PvP damage archetype at an increased fire rate. Now, this offers a trade-off, of course. If you hang on to your super, you're granted a weapon that has all of those 3 bonuses of stability, handling, and faster fire rate per shot ratio. That, tied in with Grenadier, makes your grenades charge even faster. It makes you incredibly dangerous, it increases your range, and your DPS skyrockets. It's quite possibly the best gun in the game when you're holding on to your super with this weapon. That's how good it is. Of course, though, the trade-off being that you can't use your super to make benefit of all of these pluses, and you have to wait for your super to build up to take advantage of this increased damage. So the trade-off is don't use your super and you get a monster weapon, or use your super as you would normally with this weapon and the weapon sort of becomes average. So with regard to my overall impressions in PvE, this thing is a monster whether or not you're taking advantage of the Overflow perk or not. It's easy to handle, it has high DPS output, and you get constant grenade recharge with it. It can handle itself in medium and long range, but it can handle all ranges when you have Overflow active. If you're a Sunsinger, take advantage of this weapon as much as possible, but other classes, specifically Voidwalker, where your best ability is your super, being able to smash everything with huge blasts of void, I feel somewhat restrained even when this weapon becomes an absolute monster using Overflow. When I'm running Voidwalker or maybe even Stormcaller, I definitely feel like I can continually want to use my super, so I usually take the weapon on average in PvE. But if I'm running Sunsinger with Revive, this weapon is pretty much the only weapon I'm going to use. You basically have that choice, like I said earlier. You either use your super for your DPS, or you use this weapon and grenades and no super. So it makes you make that choice. Now in PvP, it's interesting. Same advice as to before: stay in medium to long range, and anything short of that gets you in trouble. But of course, as addressed earlier, Overflow makes it a bit interesting in PvP because it's a bit different. You have two options really. You can either A, choose to wait a significant portion of the match, not taking advantage of Overflow, and use a good but not amazing scout rifle, and then decide whether, once you have your super, you want to continue to use this ridiculously buff scout rifle at the expense of your super. Or B, you can use another weapon until you build your super up, switch to this weapon, and then shred everything as long as you don't use your super. So personally, I choose option B. I usually use another weapon to level up my super, and then switch to this weapon, and then I go murderous rampage with it, especially if I'm using Sunsinger. But if I'm in the Crucible and I'm using Voidwalker, I'll typically choose another weapon to run, and I'll take advantage of my super. So, again, yeah, that's up to you. So basically, overall, if you're using Sunsinger, this is where this weapon really, really shines, because most people just hang on to their super anyway, looking for a revive. So this gun is specifically almost designed for it. You can use it for the other two as well, and you can have great success doing it as well, but you will, of course, like I've said a few times now, won't have your super to take advantage of. So you have to ask yourself the question of, do you want a monster weapon that's honestly probably one of the best in the game, with increased grenades with your kills, but no super at all? Or do you want to use your super and have an average weapon? Interesting choice, isn't it? Have a good one.